Did you know that one major city in America has some of both the best and worst schools in the entire country? And it might not be for the reason that you think. Now, I know that sounds a bit contradictory, but consider this fact. Across all public schools in New York City, less than 40% of students passed standardized math tests in 2022. And that's significantly lower than both the state and national averages. But those results only account for the traditional government-run schools managed by New York City's Department of Education. What many people don't know is that there's a whole other set of schools in the city that regularly produce much better results. And these aren't elite private schools that cost tens of thousands of dollars to get into. In fact, they're entirely free to students. And they are so good that their students regularly achieve over twice the proficiency scores in math and English as their counterparts. So, how is that possible? Well, the answer may very well be a question of incentives brought about by options, because the incentive structure for Success Academy charter schools is a lot different than the rest of New York City's public school system. As economist Thomas Sowell pointed out in one of his recent books, while charter schools are still publicly funded, they don't have to deal with a lot of the bureaucratic red tape that dominates the rest of New York's public school system. These include things like contracts that make it virtually impossible to fire bad teachers, strict government control over things like curriculum and teaching practices. But aren't all of these things set up to achieve greater accountability? After all, these regulations are there to protect kids. Well, allegedly yes, but in reality, even with all the funding and regulations, if a public school doesn't perform well, politicians usually just throw more money at the problem. Bad results can actually equal more funding. And either way, your child will be stuck at that school unless you can afford an alternative. But if a school like a Success Academy doesn't perform well, parents can pull their kids from the school and choose another. Because the ultimate form of accountability is not a test or a government oversight committee, but whether or not you as the parent can choose to leave if the school is failing your child. This produces a powerful incentive of Success Academies to be highly responsive to parents and students rather than politicians and bureaucrats, which is why more and more parents are lining up to enter the lottery systems and wait lists in order to get their children into these schools that regularly outperform not only urban public schools, but even New York's wealthier suburban schools. But perhaps the real proof of its success comes in an area that many would rather not admit and in fact have tried to hide. For decades now, the public school system has tried to address disparities between different students based on everything from income to race. Well, the Success Academies have achieved it, and yet this fact is being ignored. Consider this. In New York City's regular public school system, barely 20% of Black and 23% of Hispanic students are proficient in math. And yet, at the Success Academy, they have a stellar academic track record that shatters the historical racial disparity in test scores that has long plagued the New York City's public school system. The Success Academy has demonstrated that all students have a chance to succeed in a good environment. So with results like this, why wouldn't everyone send their kid to a Success Academy? Well, tens of thousands are actively trying to, but unfortunately, state and city laws prevent Success Academy from operating more than 45 schools across New York City. That's right. Despite the demand, politicians and teachers unions have deliberately written the law in a way to cap the number of charter schools like Success that can legally operate in New York City. And the reason why appears to be simple. They don't want any more competition than what already exists.